And action.
Do you want Steve in the shot or not in the shot?
I'd like Steve here in all his beautiful glory.
Excellent.
Welcome, everybody, to another of my interviews with the speakers for the Shine Celebration in August. 45 speakers for 45 minutes in 45 days, 45 interviews. And today I have the amazing Clive DeCarle and the equally amazing Steve Hughes.
Hello.
He's much more enthusiastic about you than me.
A couple of comedians, if ever I've seen them. Both very entertaining. Thanks very much for joining me, guys. And I must say it's a slight surprise that Steve's with Clive, but they're haunched down in the Savanac Forest, I think it is, where Clive hangs out with the elementals. How are you both?
Brilliant.
Okay.
So that's a 10 out of 10.
Great. Okay, but great.
It's a 10 out of 10 and a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, we'll go for 7.
Yeah, you're looking good. You're looking good, Steve. So, Clive, just quickly, have you got any events coming up?
Funnily enough, and you got the 50 quid I sent you earlier. Yes, I do. The next one is the 4th of July in Hove at Raleigh Hall, where myself and Richard Vobes are going to be doing our best to entertain people. And we're actually giving them some food as well, organic food. Incredible.
Wow. Amazing. Is that from your garden or is it?
No, my garden's not big enough. But somebody who runs an organic food company that sells organic food in the post, they kindly said, can we bring along several £100 worth of our products so that people could try them, which is very generous.
Fantastic. So that's your next gig. Have we got any others coming up? Any down our way?
There's a fabulous one in August, which you're organising.
Yes, that sounds good. We've got manned showers. Do you know this?
I'm sorry.
Manned shower. Well, we've got woman showers. We've got this shower set up there, which is kind of like buckets of hot water, and big kind of vats, and you stand out in the. It's all very discreet, but it's a hand pouring shower thing that goes on. So I'm quite looking forward to that.
Right. Who does the pouring? You or somebody else?
I think we've got people to do the pouring.
Right. This could be even more interesting.
Yeah, it's wood fired, and there's a sauna there as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. So Steve, you're still in the country. How have you been?
Okay. I've just done a tour of Ireland for about 10 days, 10 shows.
And have you got any gigs coming up?
I do have. I've got one in the Attic in Southampton on the 8th of July, which I think Richard Vobes is speaking there during the day, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I've got one in Reading on the 28th of July, which I don't know the venue, but it's through a guy called Mates Rates Comedy.
Interesting. Is that like
solo shows? So
that sounds great. It's and you're doing Jam for Freedom, aren't you? You're doing Jam for Freedom.
Yeah,
that's a big one. You're going to enjoy that. Sharing a stage with David Icke, I believe.
Oh.
Amongst other people.
Is he emceeing?
Or emceeing as in rapping, or emceing as in master of ceremonies?
Yes, in why?
The David Icke rap. I don't know whether you know, but my interviews have been very ad hoc and flowing, and we've talked about all sorts of. In fact, I'd like to make this relatively mainstream because the last interview I did with Harry Rhodes, I don't know whether you know Harry. It went very. I don't know what you describe. You can't call it left field these days, can you? It went visceral, and he started talking about really quite some interesting stuff that was on the edge of our Overton window at the moment. Methylene Blue. Do you know anything about that, Clive?
Yes.
Oh, look at that. You can't get more spontaneous than that, can you? Brilliant. Go on then. Hit me with it. I'd love to know your take on it and where it's at.
Well, methylene blue is an old invention. It was invented as a blue dye in, I don't know, 1890 or something like that. And within an incredibly short time, they found that it was useful for staining microscope slides to look at microbes and whatever. And they noticed right away it killed all the microbes they were trying to stain that were previously alive. And people started taking it as like, could it be a medicine? And it turned out to be ludicrously effective as a medicine, incredibly effective. And maybe some people have heard of the term magic bullet. It was the magic bullet. And it was methylene blue that because of the MB and methylene blue magic bullet, that it was called the magic bullet. It was the first thing to be called a magic bullet because of what it would do. And it's a brain enhancer, a nootropic. For some people, it can relieve pain. It may be, for some people, one of the big answers to dementia. Many, many things. It's 130 years they've been researching the subject. And the book that Steve just showed you, The Ultimate Guide to Methylene Blue by Mark Sloan, is an incredible read. I mean, really, really absolutely amazing. It says on the front, remarkable hope for depression, COVID, AIDS, viruses, Alzheimer's, autism, cancer, heart disease, cognitive enhancement, and pain relief. So it's the great transition to metabolic medicine. I have methylene blue on my website, but as the law is currently, the rules, not the law, the legal system is, we can't tell you anything about it on the website. And the same with all our products. I mean, if I were to claim, let's say I was selling water, if I were to claim that water hydrates you, that's 2 years in jail potentially, because I've never done a double-blind placebo trial to test that water hydrates you. I've made a health claim with nothing to back it up, according to the authorities. I mean, it's just ludicrous.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I started, when they first took me off YouTube in 2014, I started something called secrethealthclub.com. And there are all the details that you need as to how to use it. There are even some pages from this book giving the instructions from the people who know best. So yeah, methylene blue. The first time I tried it, I think that I noticed a sort of mental enhancement, but it was subtle. And how much is psychology of expecting it and how much is real, I'm not sure. But lots of people, because lots of people I know have been using it recently, lots of people have really positive results. It's not terribly expensive. If you've taken enough because your pee goes green or blue. It's something they've been using in hospitals for years. I mean, you've heard of hydroxychloroquine, right? That's derived from methylene blue.
Right.
So massively safe. And it's used as a food dye. When you buy a blue food dye or you drink a slush puppy or whatever it is, that's a ridiculous shade of blue, it'll be methylene blue almost certainly that they've used because it's safe.
Yeah. So what actually is it?
It's a dye. It's a blue dye.
Yeah.
It's I can't remember the chemical name, but it's something like methylonium something. I can't remember. Yeah.
And so can you buy it readily? Is it is it on the NHS? Is it that sort of thing, or do you have to?
Well, they would have it in hospitals, but it's easy to find. It's described. It's available. It's just obviously it comes across as really bizarre, especially when people see you drinking a glass of blue liquid.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's great to have another perspective on the methylene blue. I mean, Harry was very much talking about it as being a wide-ranging therapy.
Well, it is. I would suggest it's only recently been rediscovered. Like so many of these things, when, say, in the 20s and 30s, when the drug thing started to happen, people believed the fact that, look, you don't need any of that old grandfather's rubbish, just take a pill, job done. And people believed it, so they stopped teaching all the old stuff.
Yeah.
But by 100 years ago, the health industry, the real health industry, doctors who were still doing it the old-fashioned way with herbs or whatever it might be, they were so advanced. Up till the Second World War, they were incredibly advanced. They were fixing things that now doctors are taught are impossible.
Is there any kind of those products around then that are still on the verge or periphery?
Most of them. The big ones that they didn't want you to know about, one of them is iodine. And the classic example of this is in Japan. In the Japanese language, they do not have a word for menopause, because if you have enough iodine in your diet, and they have buckets full with sea fish and loads of seaweed, because they're eating seaweed all the time, the most iodine-rich food. So breast cancer is very rare comparatively to the West, where they don't get enough iodine. And, they don't have menopausal symptoms, because at one level, why your hormones get into a disruptive state is often a lack of two things, iodine and cholesterol. And a lot of people who are eating a low-fat diet are damaging themselves big time. And people without enough iodine, which is almost everybody, because if you're exposed to chlorine in the tap water or bathing, you go swimming in the pool, you've bought some new furniture, which will be off-gassing bromine, which is a type of fire retardant that they use. If your water's fluoridated, or you're drinking a product made in Ireland or Birmingham where they fluoridate the water, it knocks the thyroid for six, because it knocks out the iodine that should be there. And so iodine used to cost £1 in any chemist, up until about 15 years ago, when the government removed it from all chemists. They stopped selling it. You still buy it online. And my favorite version, which was discovered, I think, in about 1830 by Professor Lugols, is called Lugol's iodine, Lugols, and that's iodine with the addition of potassium iodide, which is what the army use. If somebody gets radiation poisoning, they give them potassium iodide or Lugol's iodine. And people who've got brain fog, people who've got dry skin, people who walk in a room and can't remember why they walked in, people who've got thyroid issues, people whose temperature is out of control, really cold hands and feet, or like menopausal women sometimes, fluctuating, then getting really hot, having hot flushes. All that is very often primarily iodine deficiency, secondarily, maybe they're not eating enough good fat, butter or something, or they're low on selenium as well. So if somebody wants to fix their thyroid, then selenium and iodine together. But it really helps if you know what you're doing. I would say it's essential. And there are many good videos that still haven't been censored off YouTube about how to use iodine sensibly. On my Secret Health Club, there's a whole iodine and thyroid, a couple of pages where there's, you might say, hopefully, everything you need to know about how to take the right amount. Because doctors in the old days, 100 years ago, if you went to the GP and the GP didn't know what was wrong with you, there's something wrong, obviously, but they didn't know what, iodine was very often the remedy that they'd give you, like the panacea that would hopefully work for everything. Because if you take iodine, it regularizes your temperature. So there are times we've got a fever, for instance, where we may want a high temperature. There may be times where we do not want our body temperature low, because if your body temperature is running low, A, it's indicative of a thyroid problem, but B, you're just not running at optimum. So iodine's super useful. Then selenium goes with it. Pretty much everybody, I would hazard a guess, who's got fibromyalgia or something like that, ME or something, probably all of them are low on selenium. Selenium and iodine make a great pair. So it's magic. And so doctors, where they used to offer huge doses, milligram doses, now they're taught that microgram doses, like 1,000 times less, is correct. And they're absolutely wrong. The average Japanese would ingest, they reckon, about 12 milligrams of iodine a day in food. So that might be considered a sort of maintenance dose, but the authors who write the great books on the subject, the ones that really have studied it, they may suggest maybe 50 milligrams 5 days a week, just for a week, 2 weeks, maybe 6 weeks or something. Then if your temperature corrects itself, the dry skin stops, the brain fog lifts. But as Mark Twain said, don't believe anything you read in a health book, because you might get killed by a misprint. So anything I'm saying, do not act on what I've just said. I might have made a mistake and said, kilograms instead of milligrams. So check it out for yourself. With some things, let's say you take too much vitamin C or too much magnesium, the worst that's going to happen is you end up with diarrhea. The body's self-regulating like that. But iodine is such an incredible, important, but powerful substance that it's important to know what you're doing. But I've seen people who had results in a day. People suddenly, I can think more clearly. More often it might happen in a week or two, but it's remarkable. And I would suggest that everybody pretty much in this country is going to be low on iodine. It's almost a given. If you take a bath in chlorine or have a shower in chlorine, that's going to deplete it. Just one shower.
It's interesting, isn't it, about bathing? I've got a filter system on the water that I drink in my house, but I still bathe in the normal water.
Let me tell you, you want to watch a video that I put out a few weeks ago. I got 3 glasses of tap water, right, unfiltered. I put chlorine indicator drops that people use for swimming pools in the first glass. It goes green. Second glass, I put my fingers in for a few seconds and take it out. Chlorine indicator drops, doesn't go green. Next glass, I put a bit of raw potato, stirred it around, take it out. Indicator drops, doesn't go green. Where did the chlorine go? Could it be that it went into my fingers in 5 seconds, went into the potato that I could have cooked in 5 seconds? People need to realize that chlorine gas was the thing they killed people with in World War I, and having a shower, breathing it, but bathing in it, up until recently, I had no idea that chlorine seams enters the body in seconds, leaving the water. And so people are poisoning themselves. They're dumbing themselves down mentally. It's a poison.
It's an absolute attack, isn't it? The water system.
We're being attacked, unfortunately, on almost every level.
Yeah. It's quite amazing how they've managed to weaponize pretty much everything: the air, the water, the soil, right across the board. I was watching a thing about atrazine yesterday, about the feminization and how in places in America they put atrazine in the water. Yeah, have you heard about that over here? Is that something you've come across?
No, I haven't heard it happening.
No, it's I think it's an American thing, but obviously there's a story about the frogs, isn't there, where the frog changed its sex from male to female. So in terms of the water, I guess you've just got to filter it, haven't you? You have to filter it before you have a bath or a shower.
Well, there are a number of ways to deal with it. I've got a reverse osmosis is great. It's not as good as distilling the water, but it gets lots and lots of the impurities out, but it's sort of empty of water. So let's say you drink a glass of distilled water or reverse osmosis water. So it goes in empty, but it comes out with lots of minerals and stuff in, right? So there are 2 arguments here. There's one argument which says the only stuff that the water pulls out is the stuff you didn't want anyway. And then the other argument is water is the ultimate solvent. Therefore, surely it's taking the good stuff out with the bad, the negatively charged with the positively charged. So I don't know the answer to that one, but people, if you take some real sea salt, Celtic salt or whatever, Malden salt, and you put it in a glass of water, a little pinch, not enough that it tastes salty, just a little pinch, and you give 2 glasses of water, one with salt, one without, 100% people like the one with the salt in it. So it's not salty, but it's enough because it softens the water. And so it just slips down, it suddenly becomes smooth. So I put either a bit of salt in water or fulvic minerals. Fulvic minerals would be my choice of the two. And so, fulvic minerals, for instance, are going to detox you. The nature of them is they go right into the cell and neutralize the toxins like glyphosate, like graphene oxide, and it puts all the trace elements into the cells, which are essentially missing from food these days, missing from the soil. So fulvic minerals come from the soil. It's just a water extraction from, there are a few rare sources around the world where somehow some geological thing happened and the minerals and stuff have got so concentrated that you can literally add water, drain the soil, drain water through it, and out comes this incredibly rich bunch of trace elements, because these days they just grow crops, don't they, with nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK, and you can grow a plant with 3 minerals alone, basically. But, what about the other 70 odd?
Yeah. Could you, I don't know whether you know about this, but it's a question that's come up recently. Somebody asked me about this. When we put Epsom salts in our bath, to when people say have a nice relaxing bath and you have Epsom salts, what actually does that do? Do you know?
Okay, so Epsom salts are magnesium sulfate. Now, many people, I would say 99% of all health practitioners would tell you that having a bath in, say, a kilo of Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, will pull toxins out of you. And this is indeed true. However, just recently, days ago, I was speaking to this lady who said that she was brought up with racehorses. She was brought up in a racing yard. And when she was a child, she realized that the jockeys used to have baths in Epsom salts. Why? Because they weighed less. It pulled the water out as well as the toxins. And so it turns out that having a bath in Epsom salts is actually quite dehydrating. In fact, the most dehydrating thing that the jockeys could find. So if you do have a bath in Epsom salts, clearly drink loads of water before, during, after. But remember, again, it's going to pull out stuff that's good for you. Some of the water-soluble minerals, presumably, are going to be sucked out. So again, if you're going to drink water, put some sea salt or fulvic minerals in there so that you're remineralizing yourself as well as rehydrating yourself.
So people who just bathe in normal water, is there any way we can counteract that?
Sure. I mean, the risk of advertising, on my website, I've got a vitamin C shower filter, because vitamin C neutralizes chlorine, instantly neutralizes it. So a lot of people who use the shower filter say not only, they don't get the smell of the chlorine anymore, but their skin feels better, because vitamin C is very good for the skin. Vitamin C is a magic product, really, for everything. So you can put vitamin C in the bath. That'll neutralize the chlorine just like that. You could put borax, real borax, not borax substitute, real borax in the bath. Teaspoonful, tablespoonful, that will neutralize fluoride. If you take borax or boron as a supplement, boron comes from borax, that again, if you're eating or you're subjected to fluoride one way or another, that will help neutralize it, as will iodine.
So is it like a teaspoon in a bath?
Teaspoonful of vitamin C would be loads.
Really?
Probably the same with borax. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
But they're making, borax is one of those things, just like iodine, they're making it really difficult to get now.
Yeah.
So if you want borax, buy a kilo of it now. It's dead cheap. If you can't get it in England, you can order it from a friend in America because it's not banned over there.
I have one of those little containers that you put water in to structure it. That does a vortex.
Oh yeah, very good.
And I was told to spin that up and then put it into a machine that hydrolyzes it with a little bit of borax.
Puts hydrogen into the water.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to be careful with those devices.
Yeah.
A number of them around, and some of them are not made from high quality materials. Yeah. If you're going to start electrolyzing water, you want to make sure that if you're using stainless steel or whatever the material might be, that isn't going to react with the electrolysis that's going on. So hydrogen water bottles, if you're sure you've got a really good one, then that's the way to go. Osmio, we sell some of their products. I don't know if they've got the hydrogen water bottle, but Osmio do one, and that one is safe and good and tested and proper. So many things you can do with water. I've got several interviews with a lady called MJ Pangman, who has a website and a book called Dancing with Water. And she spent her whole life researching water and the effects of increasing hydrogen and so on. I got lucky enough to meet a chap some, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, who had got a hydrogen generator, a Grander, a Swiss company, I think, called Grander, water structuring device, and one or two bits and pieces. And he was giving baths to people using magnesium, and I think bicarb, and pumping hydrogen, treated hydrogen, into the water. So, prior to the bath, it was bubbling loads of hydrogen. And he discovered that it was reversing, and I'm going to spell the next word with a K, cancer. And he went to the BMA after doing loads of experiments and finding positive results. And basically, the story he tells is that he was threatened, decided that the safest thing to do is to move house and never talk to anybody about it again. But he was secretly giving treatments. And so he said, do you want to try it? So I got into this bath. The hydrogen had turned the, there's bicarb, the magnesium, sort of milky color. And he had various meters so that you could see what it had done to the water. You could see the ORP, the parts per million. You could see everything that was happening with the water with these gauges. And he said, look, have a good look at your skin prior to the treatment in the mirror. And after 25 minutes soaking in the hydrogen water, have another look. And visible difference. Hydrogen's incredible. We sell a product which a lot of people who have Parkinson's are getting benefit from. For many people, there are loads of videos on the Secret Health Club about this. Not everybody, but for some people with Parkinson's, they breathe. We don't sell actually pure hydrogen. We sell hydroxy, which is a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen, a machine that creates that. And they have these in hospitals. And right now, several universities are studying it. So a lot of people with Parkinson's just find that after a couple of hours of breathing, their shaking stopped for a while. Maybe not all day or anything, but there are loads of interesting things for Parkinson's. And again, I've got a Parkinson's page on the Secret Health Club. One of the ones I've seen interesting results with is something called NADH. NADH. It's got to be the highest quality you can get. Yeah, again, in slightly high doses, I've seen Parkinson's patients stop shaking. Same with cannabis. Cannabis oil, with many Parkinson's patients, just calms the nervous system down, maybe rewires it, I don't know. And they stop shaking. Quite interesting.
It's if you get into it, it's kind of a sad thing that we're not allowed to do these different therapies.
We're allowed, and I'm sure well-meaning doctors would give these therapies if they were legally allowed to, and if they knew they existed.
Yeah.
As you know, the answers to all the world's problems are on many levels really simple.
Yeah.
Little teeny tiny changes, and everything could get better overnight.
Yeah.
But health, the reason I went into health was that I thought people were so ill and therefore not strong and able to do stuff, that if you want to change the world, the first thing to do is to fix people's health, which is why I sort of went in this direction.
I made it a key component of the Shine seminars that we talked about health and well-being. You can be a spiritual person and talk about your body as a temple as much as you want, but if you don't look after that body, and you haven't got your vehicle to move around in, then you're not on the playing field. And it's one of the major components. And moving forward, because everything's so weaponized now, and people are beginning to wake up to the fact that their food is just poison. I think that it's interesting, Clive, actually, because when I was one of my groups, and I'm not going to name the group, but I was a local coordinator for one of the kind of freedom groups. We did a straw poll of what was the most important thing that they really wanted to talk about, and it was nutrition and the food supply. That was what came out of that. Almost 70% of the people that we polled said that food and nutrition was the key factor, for obvious reasons. But I think it's one of the first things that people, when they go through their kind of awakening, that they come up against. They're suddenly surrounded by all this stuff and they don't know what it is. I still go into people's houses now and I look in their fridge and I see things like Benecol, and I'm thinking, where are we going? Where are we going with this? And there seems to be this pseudo science with kind of normal products, with the Frankenfood, and this kind of lab grown meat and stuff, and plant based, cricket protein and all this sort of weird stuff that is kind of being pushed into the kind of the woke community. Actually, that's their the home that they're trying to do it. So super important subject. And
they're trying to persuade everybody to go vegan, and that can be really dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
yeah it's interesting. My stepmom, I grew up vegetarian, and my dad was vegetarian from 1956, so he was in another generation. But my stepmom, not 3 years ago, she hadn't eaten meat since 1977, and I was at their house and she was eating some ham, and I was just like, "What? This is really strange. I've known this woman like since the 70s, and she was eating ham, and she kind of, I said, "Oh, why have you started eating ham?" And she was like, "Oh, well, I just fancied something tasty. I fancied something that would, that had more taste than vegetables," which is kind of weird. But I felt there was an underlying thing there. It felt to me intuitively that, and I don't know whether you can cast some light on this, but her body was telling her that she needed some meat. Would you say that was fair?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let me tell you a story about myself. A few weeks ago, I had a hair mineral analysis done to see where I was at. When it came back, I was shocked. And even if you can't read it, you can see that there are two. Where the white bar is, that's normal. I've got two things off the charts high. I thought, bloody hell, I thought I knew what I was doing, And it turned out that actually the root cause of it was I've got low iron going on. And recently I've been craving beef, which I don't really like that much, and black pudding, just craving stuff. I want to eat meat, the richest source of iron. So I do, clearly our bodies know what to do. It's just us that have been educated to not know what to do.
That's almost like you're pregnant. Your body needs something.
I've been putting on weight a bit, but no, I'm not. Even the trans people would say it's possible, obviously.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, do you think that is there a male thing there? Is that iron thing? Is it because we
Well,
need more iron?
most men have too much iron, and quite a number of men who give blood feel much happier afterwards,
Yeah.
right? Much better. So iron is an interesting one. If you go to the doctor, they're likely to give you a lump of iron to chew on. What you see, Rice Krispies or whatever, fortified with thiamine, uh, riboflavin, and iron. And you can take a magnet. If you take a bag of some of those cornflakes that are fortified, scrunch them up, add some water, keep it in the bag, and take a powerful magnet. Iron filings, they can legally, it's just incredible. They can legally add iron filings, which are absolutely no good to you at all, and say we've added iron. I mean, how criminal is the whole system? It's just a joke.
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it? It really is ridiculous. I don't know what to say about that at all.
But you can do it yourself. I'm not making this up.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. They just put any old nonsense in there, don't they? So Clive, just you mentioned the company that you get your food off. Do you have a particular diet that you follow, or do you just eat what you feel like, or?
Well, no, I decided a while back that if at all possible, I would not choose to poison myself.
Yeah.
So having made that decision, it makes shopping really easy. If it's not organic or biodynamic or grown by somebody who doesn't use chemicals and hormones and pesticides and herbicides and fungicides and larvicides and all the rest of it, I just decided I don't want to poison myself. I don't want to poison my kids. Do you want to poison granny? Do you want to poison a baby? Let me give you just one quick thing about food and babies. Babies should be fed one food type at a time. So what they do, the mothers, thinking they're doing a good thing, they buy mixed vegetables in a jar. They buy mixed fruits in a jar. This is the wrong way to do it. You want to introduce your child to one food at a time. Now it's time for a raspberry. See how they react with that. But what happens is that some children maybe are allergic to one of the foods in the fruit salad. They're allergic to whatever it is, or one of the vegetables. And so the baby's throwing up, they're not happy. And because you're giving them a mixture of stuff, you don't know which one's giving the problem. But if you introduce to your babies, once they're ready for food, sort of one food at a time, you can observe them. Do they go hyper? Do they go manic? What happens? And
yeah, it's interesting that I was talking to somebody who's very conscious of the food, of giving children food, and they said that it takes 4 or 5 times for a child to actually take on a food, and lots of mothers don't persevere with the particular food, so they'll give it to them maybe 2 or 3 times, and they go, that child doesn't like that, but it actually takes kind of 5 times. You have to give the child the food for them to actually work with it.
I think it's our natural defense mechanism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Your body is going to protect you. Your body's on your side. So you're going to be careful about everything because, anything might poison you, mightn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's interesting. I've just been on I wasn't very well a couple of weeks ago, and I came out of that. And I was just eating fruit for a week. And I actually found that incredibly refreshing in a strange way. I've never done it before. It was smoothies mainly, fruit juices and fruit, but I didn't eat anything else. How can you do that for a period of time? How does that work? Because there's clearly things not.
There are some times with some people who I recommend a raw vegan diet to for a month, say, because that's what they need to detox. There are other people who are maybe weak and not very strong, who I might recommend a sort of natural fat and carnivore direction because they need to build up their muscles or whatever it might be. The problem with fruit is that let's say it were winter now. Well, we wouldn't have much. We might have been able to preserve some apples and pears and sand or whatever, but we wouldn't be getting mangoes, for instance. The other thing is that as so many people, maybe half the population, are now coming towards having diabetes, through eating too many carbs, too many sugars, and so on. Some fruits are very, very sweet. And people are drinking fruit juice, that can really damage people. People are thinking they're being healthy and drinking fruit juice. That's so refined. It's so far away from nature where we're doing lots of chewing, and so too much fruit. While I would agree with you, for maybe a week, it could be fantastic. You feel great, probably light and refreshed and all that. But if you ate a lot of bananas, you're probably going to find yourself half a stone heavier. I mean, the berries are said to be the healthiest of all the fruits because they have the lowest sort of sugar content: strawberries, raspberries, all the berries. And I mean, pretty much everybody knows that blueberries are meant to have great properties for health, and I think they do. And there are some elements, the ellagic acid in strawberries, that again, spelled with a K, is anti-cancer.
I found after a week that I didn't want to eat any more fruit.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it just naturally happened, and I just started eating. What happened is I actually didn't want to eat many carbs when I came off the fruit.
Well, the carbs are addictive. I mean, also carbs in fruit, but the grains are the addictive bit. They're really addictive.
Yeah.
But if you think back to when we were in the forest, hundreds of years ago, whatever, this time of year, that today we might be finding the wild strawberries. Right. And what are we going to do? We're going to have a small punnet. No, we're going to eat the fucking lot. We're going to eat them all, right? We're going to gorge ourselves on so many strawberries until we just don't want strawberries anymore. And I would suggest that's the body going, whoopee, get all those strawberry nutrients in. And then when you've reached the sufficiency, you don't want any more. And this is how they do some mineral testing with taste. For instance, you can get a zinc taste test. And if it tastes sweet to you, you need it. If it tastes bitter, you've got too much. If it tastes of water, you still need it. You want it to taste slightly metallic, then you got the right amount, because the body is self-regulating. I learned this literally 38 years ago. I'd been poisoned with antibiotics, and I went to somebody who did lots of tests. And I've forgotten where I was going with that. I got distracted.
Well, I was going to say, Clive, you just made me think of something, because I think I've got some reaction to refined carbs.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Because change carbs. I mean, wheat used to grow like 5 foot high. Then they hybridized it to make the genetically small dwarf wheat. And probably half the population can't handle wheat if it's the modern stuff, but they're fine with the old stuff.
Yeah. I find if I have any type of refined white bread, I fall asleep.
Well, that's a sign you've been poisoned.
Yeah. I fall asleep.
If you feel tired after a meal, you're having, if you like, a negative allergic reaction.
Yeah. I stay away from white bread, like 100%. Occasionally, if I have it, because obviously it is the good stuff in terms of the dopamine and the addictions, it just knocks me out. It literally just knocks me out. And then when I wake up, I'm like, oh, I must have had a cheese sandwich.
So I mean, I'm older than you, and I was brought up on white bread. At school, I never met anybody ever who had a problem with white bread. Never. Unheard of. Gluten, what's that? It's because they've changed the wheat. I bet if you went out, let's say, to the Middle East and had some old-fashioned bread made the old-fashioned way, I'll tell you the big one is the normal bread, traditional bread. You'd mix it. If it was yeast, for instance, you'd mix it, you let it rise, you knock it down, you let it rise, you knock it down. And it was an 8-hour fermentation process to get rid of the phytic acid and the phytates that naturally occur in wheat. But that 8-hour leavening process, whatever it is, made it safe to eat. They don't do that. Now they batch bake 10 minutes in a steam oven, that the white bread doesn't go through the traditional process. So the combination of modern food processing and modern varieties have really upset a lot of people's tummies. Their whole guts are upset.
Yeah. Does that go
brain damage?
Is that the same for organic wheat?
Well, it depends. If it's organic, modern, hybridized modified wheat, it still isn't going to be terribly good for you.
Yeah.
You know, obviously glyphosate, the herbicide sprayed is a real poison. But I mean, what we have to do as consumers is find the people who are doing the real food, preferably with the old-fashioned seeds, not the modern Euro tomato that tastes of nothing. People are doing it the traditional way, like biodynamic or organic or whatever, that are doing it in the old way, where they're putting the goodness back into the soil. Because every harvest of wheat these days in the commercial world, they're taking the wheat out. In the old days, they'd burn the stubble to the ground, putting all the minerals back, except for the grains they took out. But now they've banned that. So every harvest, they're literally taking the minerals out and not putting them back. Yeah, they may be putting chemicals back, but it isn't the same. So, the more overweight somebody is, the more they're starving, the more they are in starvation, because they're having to eat all this stuff because their body is calling out, give me more nutrition, give me more nutrition. And so they're eating the food that's available. And obviously the cheaper the food is, often the worse it is. And so they're blaming, oh, I'm so bad, I'm eating so much. No, it's not your fault. It's the fact that your body is calling for nutrients that aren't there and making you eat more. If you eat, I mean, let's say you eat a really condensed food, like a soup that you've condensed down to a really concentrated thing, you don't need that much of it. Similarly, I know you're not a meat eater, but for the carnivores, liver is absolutely concentrated energy and nutrition. You don't need much of it. Whereas a lot of foods are so empty, your body's saying, give me more, I haven't eaten yet.
Yeah. It's interesting. I do have this debate with people in some of the groups about organic food. And, as you know, Clive, I grew up, my mum owned a health food shop, half a health food shop in the 80s in Burnley, which is, that's a task in itself. And, pretty much for the last 20 years, I've lived organically. And I delivered organic vegetables for 6 years for Organics to Go. And, my wife worked in Earthbound, which is an organic shop in Bristol. So I'm living that life. I do get sometimes in some of the groups, I wouldn't say accused, but there's a kind of oh, Eli, you're looking down on us. You're spending a lot of money on your food, or you've got a certain attitude towards it, where I'm trying to encourage people to eat organically, and they say it's really, really expensive. And then I have to go into this whole discussion about, cheap CAC costs nothing. And if you eat organic food, the perception is that it's expensive. But I always say to people, just eat less. Now, do you have a take on that? Because
yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there are ways to eat organically fresh that's so cheap. I mean, if somebody likes hummus, they like falafel, you can get 100 grams of chickpeas for relatively pennies. And hardly costs anything, 10p or something.
Yeah.
Now, you get a jar. Sorry, I'm running out of liquid.
Get a drink, Clive.
I will. You add water, you sprout them. 3 or 4 days later, your 100 grams has probably arguably become 300 or 400 grams. You've quadrupled its bulk. So your food costs a quarter of what it did, and it's alive. If it's a dried chickpea, well, it's latent potential, but it's not energy ridden. But once you've sprouted it, now it's like maybe 50 times more vitamins and minerals or whatever, because it's growing, it's alive. And that's, a really cheap way to eat. You can sprout almost everything. Lentils, any pulses you can think of, with the exception of kidney beans. Mustn't have those raw. But even then, you can sprout them and cook them.
Yeah.
And so you could literally cut your costs of that sort of food down dramatically. Then broccoli sprouts, you can sprout onions, you can sprout any seeds you like, and you can buy, whereas seeds in the nursery cost £2 for 25. If you can buy organic broccoli seeds, you can buy like 1,000 seeds for a couple of quid or something, and you can just sprout like mad. Or again, you can, if you buy loads of different organic seeds for sprouting, you can put them all together in one kilner jar. You just soak them in water, and then at the end of the day, you dry them out, and then you just wash the seeds and just leave them damp in the kilner jar with the lid off. And you can create a fresh salad in a couple of days by sprouting it. You know, if you like radishes, get some radish seeds, sprout them, whatever you like. And you've got a homegrown miniature salad that could not be fresher. So you put it in your mouth, it doesn't even know it's dead yet. It's not.
Absolutely. It's interesting in the kind of the prepping community. You know, there's a whole fallacy that you've got to have tins and these big packs of stuff and dehydrated everything. And I was having a conversation with a lady, and she said, "I've just got loads of things to sprout." Hi, Clive. Hi, Steve. And it was really interesting because we were talking about sprouting, and you know, if there's no shops, if all the shops have shut, but you've got loads and loads of seeds and pulses, and you've got a supply of water, you've got your own little farm in your kitchen, and it makes so much sense, doesn't it?
Well, and you don't need, your seeds don't need light to sprout. They do that in the dark, so you don't even need a windowsill just to grow fresh stuff in your garden. But I mean, if you happen to live in the country, you might find that you're blessed with stinging nettles. You know, stinging nettles are the highest iron-containing plants, and I mean, stinging nettles are full of nutrients. And what I do is, if you happen to like pesto, and maybe you're not growing basil in the garden or whatever, you can make quite a nice pesto with the top 6 leaves, say, of stinging nettles. Put some garlic and chili, cheese, pine nuts, whatever you might. I don't buy pine nuts; they're so expensive. I use sunflower seeds as part of the base of the pesto, and it's quite nice.
Yeah.
And here for the last month or so, they've been wild garlic growing. That makes even better pesto.
Wild garlic.
I love wild garlic, and I make it and then pop it in the freezer so that I can have it later in the year. If I get, let's say, a celery, for instance, I'll cut off the top part. Then you can just take the bottom part, which otherwise throw away, and just replant it. It'll grow into a new celery.
Yeah, amazing.
You know, and it's true with lots of plants. Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. Clive, we have come to the end of our time, I'm afraid. I've got to be quite strong on these conversations, but hopefully we'll do it again. And I really appreciate your time and your service to the community as well. And you are making a real difference to people's lives by, you know, disseminating this information, this wealth of knowledge that you have. And you know, your name cropped up twice today in other conversations. You know, the knowledge that you're giving to people and helping people with their health. So I just want to say, on behalf of the community, thank you very much for what you're doing. It's you know, it's great to be around you.
Well, thank you very much. Likewise.
Yeah, brilliant. Steve, go on, Clive. Say your thing.
No, well, you've got another 45-minute opportunity here, but that may not suit all concerned.
Steve, do you want to do an interview? Are you up for it?
When, now?
Yeah.
Do you want to do one now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Give me 2 seconds.